The Ghost in the Alley. From spooky Canada. Rumors were rife about the alleyway behind the tavern. It was haunted, folks said, haunted by the ghost of a young girl who had been found murdered in that self-same passage. People avoided the small street after dark, for the spirit was said to be a vengeful one, and, according to the stories, she had taken more than one life in her quest to avenge her death. Of course, no one could name who had actually been killed by the ghost. It was always someone from out of town. But the tales were enough to keep people away from the alley at night, though it was frequently used as a shortcut to the main road during the day. Fortunately for the owners of the tavern that backed onto the alley, their front door faced a well-lit road, and so business was not slack, even with a reputed ghost in their back pocket. In fact, people sometimes came to drink there and discuss the story of the vengeful ghost in the alleyway behind. Then one night, while the tavern was full of drinkers, a nasty character named O'Hare wandered into the bar. The bartender looked upon him with distaste, for his reputation was a foul one. Women and children were not safe in his presence. Mothers whisked their young daughters away from his vicinity if he so much as looked at them, and the children in town were carefully instructed to avoid him. O'Hare had also been known to pick a fight with the men in town over the least little incident. But he paid cash for all his drinks, and so the bartender was instructed to serve him, though he never lingered to chat. When O'Hare had consumed far too much alcohol, he suddenly announced to the bar that he'd seen a pretty young thing in the alley out back of the tavern. The bartender froze in the middle of polishing a glass, and the men around the bar exchanged covert glances. No one said a word, but everyone was thinking about the ghost of the vengeful young girl. The bartender could not imagine who else would be hanging about the alley at this time of night, since everyone in town avoided walking there after dark. "I'm gonna go talk to her," O'Hare stuttered drunkenly with a leer. Everyone in the bar looked down at their glasses as he stumbled to his feet. No one made a move to stop him, and no one mentioned the ghost. There was a quiet air of, "he deserves what's coming to him," about the bar as O'Hare left the building. "I hope the ghost gets him," someone muttered into his ale. No one bothered looking to see who had voiced the sentiment, since it was one they all shared. "It's just too bad that there isn't really a ghost," thought the bartender, setting down the shining glass and picking up another one to polish. O'Hare sorely needed a lesson in human kindness and respect for others. At that moment, a horrible scream came from the alley. Everyone in the tavern looked up in shock and fear. Had there really been a ghost out there? Or was O'Hare up to his old tricks and even now accosting one of their womenfolk? The men leapt to their feet and raced as one to the back door of the tavern. Pouring out into the street, they were met by an unnatural cold, and their eyes dazzled by a blaze of light. The bartender thrust his way to the front of the crowd and saw the body of O'Hare lying in a pool of bright white light. The bartender thrust his way to the front of the crowd and saw the body of O'Hare lying in a pool of bright white light. His throat had been torn to pieces, and blood was spilling out in gushes. Above him hovered the semi-transparent figure of a young girl, her eyes gleaming with red fire, her mouth covered with blood. She glared down at O'Hare and then turned to look at the crowd. All the men took a giant step back.
The Headless Horseman, retold by S.E. Schlosser. One cold winter night, early in the new year, a certain Dutchman left the tavern in Tarrytown and started walking to his home in the hollow nearby. His path led next to the old Sleepy Hollow cemetery, where a headless Hessian soldier was buried. At midnight, the Dutchman came within sight of the graveyard. The weather had warmed up during the week, and the snow was almost gone from the road. It was a dark night with no moon, and the only light came from his lantern. The Dutchman was nervous about passing the graveyard, remembering the rumors of a galloping ghost that he had heard at the tavern. He stumbled along, humming to himself to keep up his courage. Suddenly, his eye was caught by a light rising from the ground in the cemetery. He stopped, his heart pounding in fear. Before his startled eyes, a white mist burst forth from an unmarked grave and formed into a large horse carrying a headless rider. The Dutchman let out a terrible scream as the horse leapt toward him at full gallop. He took to his heels, running as fast as he could, making for the bridge, since he knew that ghosts and evil spirits did not care to cross running water. He stumbled suddenly and fell, rolling off the road into a melting patch of snow. The headless rider thundered past him, and the man got a second look at the headless ghost. It was wearing a Hessian commander's uniform. The Dutchman waited a good hour after the ghost disappeared before crawling out of the bushes and making his way home. After fortifying himself with schnapps, the Dutchman told his wife about the ghost. By noon of the next day, the story was all over Tarrytown. The good Dutch folk were divided in their opinions. Some thought that the ghost must be roaming the roads at night in search of its head. Others claimed that the Hessian soldier rose from the grave to lead the Hessian soldiers in a charge up nearby Chatterton Hill, not knowing that the hill had already been taken by the British. Whatever the reason, the Headless Horseman continues to roam the roads near Tarrytown on dark nights from that day to this.